even during this season. We're constantly upgrading technology and trying to improve things and do better and better. So yeah, a busy time, but very grateful to be seeing the things that are coming about in terms of what NDIS has meant for my family personally. And it's seeing so many success stories with people along the way, and the good things that, you know, with funding you're able to achieve. So a little bit about me. Thanks, Mel.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. For anyone who hasn't met me before, my name's Mel. I work with Plan Tracker as part of the community engagement team. And I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping while we've got everyone jumping in. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us live, and to anyone who's watching the replay as well. We've also got a few of our team members who will be helping us out. We've got Justine, who will be helping me in the chat box. And we've also got Janelle, who's going to be doing some closed captioning for this webinar series. So Janelle, I'm going to try not to speak too quickly for you. For anyone who would like to turn the closed captioning on, you can do so in the bottom bar. So you'll see a bunch of options down there. You should see a CC in a box with closed caption below it, and there's an arrow next to that that you can click on to show or hide and adjust some of those settings for your own viewing pleasure. So what we might do is, Elisa, I know we've got a jam-packed webinar to get through with lots of questions. We've had a fantastic response from everyone who are really eager to hear your thoughts, and also the thoughts of Plan Tracker and our interpretation of some of the recent changes in the NDIA. So what we might do is I'm just going to jump us across into our presentation slides. So just give me one moment to get that up on screen for you, and we'll jump in if you're ready.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mel. Yeah, look, as Mel said, you know, there's been a lot of changes recently and a lot of information coming out from the NDIA. And we take questions every day from participants and family members, from providers, from support coordinators, all around, what does this mean for me? Can I purchase this? How is this going to work? What does this mean? What's this new cancellation changes? What about iPads? You know, a whole range of questions. And so we just thought it would be useful to go through and have a look at what has changed and what hasn't changed, and what that might mean for you today. All right. So the first thing that's worth saying is that how we do plan management or self-management in terms of deciding what things you can and can't buy, all of those same guiding principles, I guess, that the NDIA has put out for us around choice and control. What can I spend my funding on? Most of you will be familiar with the Participant Guidebook 3, which is a great book, and it just talks through what some of those budgets are intended for, the way that disability support and funding in your package, in your plan, is really about bridging the gap between disability and an ordinary life. And there's a really useful set of questions on page 9. And page 9, it's pretty sure it's page 9, goes through 7 questions. And those questions are still the same. So when you're thinking about, you know, can I use my support worker remotely? Well, yeah, if it's providing you with support to actually help you achieve the things you need to achieve through your day, it's good value for money, it's safe, it helps you connect with your community and with your family members and other people, then yes, all of those 7 guiding questions at the NDIA ask us to consider, then yeah, it's just that it's delivering in a slightly different way. So we've actually put together what we call our My Supports, My Choice tool. And that allows you to just go through and record your ideas and your answers around any of those questions. So if you've got an area where you think, oh, I'm not sure if this kind of fits or if I should be claiming it, you can just work through those 7 questions, pop your ideas down, your thoughts. It doesn't give you a yes, no at the end, because gratefully, there's no shopping list of what we can and can't do when it comes to NDIS funding. It's very individualized for each person. So it's a great way just to show that, hey, at this point in time, I considered all these options, and out of that, I collected my ideas, and should you later need those for any reason, here they are in an emailed report. So feel free to make use of that. That's free for anybody, not just Plan Tracker customers, of course. Okay, so Mel, do we want to talk a little bit about, what have we got on there? COVID, loading, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'd love to hear a little bit more about the new 10% COVID loading. I know there's been a lot of questions coming in as to what supports and services does that apply to and what's not included. But really, I think a lot of the questions that we're getting around COVID, the 10% COVID loading is, can my provider automatically charge me this loading if it's under one of the services that they deliver? So if it applies to their service, and how exactly does that work? So if my provider, for instance, a question we had this morning was, if my provider hasn't told me that they're going to be charging the additional, can they automatically just charge it for the support service that they're delivering for me?
Great. Okay. Good series of questions. So the first thing is, what is the COVID 10% loading and why do we have it? And really, that's a good spot to start. So as you'll be aware, as a community across our nation, the federal and state governments are working overtime to make sure that economically we come through this season, through this pandemic. And one of the areas they looked at is, how can we support, as a nation, how can we support our disability workforce and make sure that these businesses continue to exist, whether they're businesses or not-for-profit. And we as a nation need them to exist. We don't want people going under at this point. We don't want companies unable to provide service or to see it through. And so the NDIS looked at that and said, look, we need these workers. We don't want to be rebuilding our workforce in 6 months' time. So how can we support? And one of the ways they did that is to put on this 10% COVID-19 loading. So literally, they put out a new price guide on March 1, and then with the craziness that is our world, were forced to bring out this new price guide again on the 25th of March. So from the 25th of March, there's a 10% increase in the price guide for pretty much all capacity building supports, except for plan management and support coordination, and most core supports as well. Now, what does that mean for you? If you're a participant with a plan, the NDIA hasn't increased the funding in your plan to cover that extra charge. So at the moment, if you're being charged COVID-19 pricing, then you are going to run through your funding a little bit faster than you would have. To compensate for that, it's becoming much easier to request an early review, as well as moving funding around from perhaps a bucket that you weren't using or aren't able to use as easily in this season into spaces that you might need it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The 10% loading, it depends on how you are managed, how your plan is managed, and whether you have a service agreement with your provider. So if your plan is agency managed and you have a service agreement that says that you agree to pay the top price guide rate, then in that case, you've already pre-agreed with your provider for them to be able to charge you whatever the price guide maximum is. Again, you can always have a conversation. A lot of things are solved by conversation. The second thing is, if your plan is plan managed, then you may or may not have a service agreement. When you're using a plan manager, basically you are a consumer, as you are with agency, but much more so, where you can go to your provider and say, we don't actually have an agreement in place for you just to up the charges to me, but look, we understand the situation that exists right now, and we understand the heart of why this is in place. So yes, we're happy to pay the extra. Or actually, no, we're not happy to pay the extra because we're just choosing not to, and we're choosing to use our funding in a different way. It's your call. And that's a great thing about being a consumer. So it's not automatic in that somebody can just charge it to you. But I would suggest that it's worth considering if you are able to use it from your plan. And we expect that there's a possibility that when the annual increase comes to all plans, which is usually done on July 1, which is usually a standard CPI increase, that they may just top up plans at that point. The agency may top plans up further to allocate for this extra fees that are flowing through. Self-management, of course, is the one method of fund management where you're not subject to price guide rates. So again, you can pay over the price guide rate or you can pay under. It's up to you to negotiate. So.
Fantastic. I know for a lot of our audience that flexibility that comes with self-management is definitely desirable. But something we'll definitely touch on later for everyone as well is how you can get that flexibility without having to do the admin piece around it. And just for everyone, something we've always advocated for with self-direction is even if you are self-managing, paying above and beyond the price guide rates for every support and service probably isn't recommended from us because you won't stretch your funding very far. But we do understand there are circumstances where you might have an amazing therapist or support worker who is charging above and beyond. And if you're self-managing and wishing to retain them, then it's definitely something that you can do with the funding. Elisa, what I'd love to jump into next is probably the hottest topic of the past week, which I think you know what's coming if I drop my slides across.
And rightly so, rightly so.
Yes. So
yes.
The NDIA has given some direction on it this week, and they've promised there's more coming soon. I'd love to get your take on probably the biggest question of the week, which is, can I buy, and you can end this sentence in, an iPad, a tablet, a laptop with my funding, any or all of the above? I think we've had every which way. So I'd love to hear from you about that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mel. Look, I think if we were paid $1 for every phone call and question we get on this in a day, it would add up quite quickly, and rightly so, because we are in uncharted waters. This is an unexpected situation to suddenly have the country pretty much in lockdown. And what the NDIA is very clear on is that they don't want in 6 months' time for people, especially children, but for all participants on the scheme, to have gone backwards because they weren't able to access the therapists and the therapy that they need. So it's really important that we don't lose those gains. The NDIA, of course, in any new changing situation, takes a little while to work out what they're doing and to communicate that clearly to us. So what we know today, we know that the NDIA has, as of middle of last week, made a really clear statement, which was made by Scott McNaughton. He's one of the GMs at the agency, and he did a podcast with Every Australian Counts, in which he very clearly said, actually, yes, whilst technology and devices are generally an everyday item, we understand that not everybody has them and has access to them. And if you don't already have them and you need access to teletherapy, so not just for calling Auntie Joan or watching Netflix on your iPad or things like that, but if you need it for teletherapy, for disability support, then yes, flexibly use your plan to go out and purchase those items, which is great and really nice to have that good, clear statement. There are a couple of things around that. So again, back to those guiding principles of the 7 questions that the NDIA asks us to consider when we say, what can I spend my funding on? One of those is it good value for money? So looking at your plan, looking at your funding, looking at those 7 questions, you perhaps don't need the $3,000 laptop to do telehealth or teletherapy. Really a tablet at under $1,000, that type of thing, may actually do the job. And we see this in the situation, like we see this precedent set by the NDIA around, say, for example, home modifications. So with home modifications, if the NDIA if you want to have a modification made and it's approved, they'll often approve it to a certain point. And they'll say, but if you would like the one that looks a different color or is a slightly better quality, then you can top up and pay the difference. And so we're taking that same approach in our interpretation of this space, which is that when you go to pay for a low risk, low cost assistive technology item, like an iPad, like a webcam, like some sort of device, that type of thing, that rate is up to $1,500 per item from your consumables budget is where it generally sits. So if you wanted to purchase something that was of a higher price, you could do that, but your claim, if you're using a plan manager, would come in at that maximum $1,500 per item price. Does that kind of make sense?
I think that makes sense. And definitely, just to reiterate, it does come back to if it's a disability related support. So if you're requiring the device that you're looking at And again, it
Yes.
doesn't have to be the top of the line. There's a lot of lower cost devices that are actually really, really good value for money, and they're going to do what you need them to do during this time. So shopping around for those, but definitely disability related support. So if it's to access providers for telehealth and teletherapy, as Elisa said, then that's something to consider. And if you're wondering, again, we do reference back to Participant Guidebook 3. It is page 9, just to confirm that for you, Elisa, as well.
Thank you. Yep. I was
Or
only reading it yesterday.
yes.
Again.
So we always reference all of our families and participants back to the guidebook from the NDIA. It's a great point of reference, and it's really nice to just go, okay, these are the questions I should be thinking about. So if you have any doubts or ifs or buts and you're umming and ahhing, then definitely just go back, go through those, or you can jump on the Plan Tracker website. The My Choice tool is available for everyone. You don't have to be a customer of ours. Anyone can jump on, and that just gives you a digital record that you can then share with, say, your support coordinator or another plan manager or whoever it might be that you're wishing to share that information with around your thinking and the decision process. So we've had a few other questions come in privately and via chat, and thank you everyone who is popping questions in the Q&A and in the chat box, really appreciating those. We will park some of them to answer a little bit later on. But Elisa, one of the flow-on ones from this hot topic of devices is, can I pay for my internet through my NDIS plan?
And look, it's a really good question. So one thing I really love about the NDIS and how the scheme works is, and this can be a little frustrating for people getting started, but there are no shopping lists. There's no list of you can and you can't. In general, I mean, there's a couple of things that, weighted blankets and a few of those funny high risky things that are on that list, but there really isn't a list of you just can't buy this, you can buy that. So what we would do in that situation is we would look at each person's situation independently and say, okay, for this person's individual plan, would access to the internet be a disability support, or would it be an everyday cost? Now, the NDIA are very clear that they don't cover everyday expenses: food, rent, internet, all those general everyday, electricity, all those everyday general things. But if in your unique circumstances, for you, that's not an everyday expense, and you need this in order to access teletherapy, and it's not for a whole range of other entertainment type purposes or everyday purposes, then in your situation it might be that is something that could be covered. But you would need to talk to, if you're a Plan Tracker customer, obviously speak to us or speak to your plan manager.
Fantastic. We've just had a question come in from Dean. Thank you, Dean, for joining us and for asking this question. It is around tech, which we're talking about right now. It's the hot topic. So can you purchase one, and I'm going to paraphrase that one is a device, so a tablet, an iPad, a laptop. Mm-hmm. Can you purchase one from your core supports budget if you don't have consumables?
Dean, that's a really great question. And the NDIA haven't quite actually answered that question yet themselves. In fact, you'll see in the couple of spaces where they talk about this online on the website, it says, we'll let you know how this works. That's the Elisa paraphrase. But basically, the logistics of how to purchase are a little bit interesting. So whilst Scott got up last week and said, use your plan flexibly, there's a couple of technical things around how that works. We're expecting that the agency will come out and make a nice clear statement. Okay, we're hoping that the agency comes out and makes a nice clear statement around, yes, for those people who just have a therapy budget, so improved daily living, for example, just have that budget and not a core budget or not a consumables budget, that yes, we can claim from there. That's what we're hoping for, and it would make the most sense. At the moment, we haven't been given that clear green light. But the wording from the agency has been that if you need this for telehealth, and this is very important, especially for children, then you should use your budget flexibly. So again, we probably wouldn't put this out as a public statement, but it's definitely a conversation worth having with your plan manager about your unique situation.
Fantastic. And I think that really stems back to everyone being individual. And as
Mm.
much as everyone has choice and control, and we're talking about individualized supports, that's what the NDIS has always been about. It's been about personalizing what disability funding looks like. So having a conversation, whether it's with your LAC or with your plan manager or however your funding is managed, it's definitely the place to start if you have questions for that. Stemming on from that, Elisa, we definitely have been getting a few more questions around short courses and software. Where do they sit in terms of being funded under your NDIS plan? Can I, for instance, access a short online course, or can I buy a piece of software?
Sure. Yeah. And look, I think the thing is to remember that the scheme hasn't changed. So the mechanics of how the scheme works and how we make decisions hasn't really changed. But we understand that the circumstances in which we're currently living have changed. So software, is it a disability support? So if it's a disability support, then that's something that you would generally be paying for or using your funding to fund. So, you know, examples, iPad apps, communication apps, those types of things. Again, Netflix, probably not so much, you know, it'd be possibly a long bow to draw for it to be a disability support. But yeah, generally, if there's software that you require as a disability support, then yes, you can claim that from your plan. And the mechanics of how that works, usually in plan management situation, people just send us a receipt from either Google Play or App Store, and we would do a reimbursement for that. Or if you're self-managing, of course, you know how to take care of those spaces. The second question, Mel, was short courses.
Yes.
Because we've all got a lot of time on our hands. Well, some of us.
Some of us.
Some of us. Some of us are a little bit busy. Again, coming back to, is it a disability support? So does it meet the criteria as a disability support? If it's simply a course that, hey, I'd like to do this course and I have time, then it's probably an everyday expense, like a whole bunch of people out there are doing and looking at right now. I do know there's been a lot of press around free courses from TAFE and from community colleges, and they're looking at some short online university courses as well that will be a reduced fee or something around that. So it is definitely worth shopping around. If you're looking at some sort of let's use a really clear disability example. Let's say a social skills course. Then that's a disability support. The fact it's being delivered online is neither here nor there. So again, all the standard things fit for that. If it's a disability support, then yes, of course, it can be claimed from your plan, making sure you have the right budgets for that, making sure that it comes in under price guide, you know, paying at the end of the course, not prepaying, you know, all those kind of standard things that happen for paying for things.
Fantastic. All right. I think we might, just conscious of time here, let's jump into the next topic. So I'm just going to move our slides along here for everyone. There's been a lot of changes with support coordination, COS, as it's also known in the space. What's changed recently, and really how is that impacting participants and support coordinators?
Yeah, another good question. So for those who have support coordination and have used support coordinators, they are or maybe you're a support coordinator yourself, they are a fantastic resource. So they are somebody who can help you to look at your unique situation, think about the types of supports that you might need, and then go out and help you find them. We all know how tricky it can be building your team. You know, it's not something that happens overnight, and it takes a little while, and sometimes you try a relationship with one therapist or one support worker and it just doesn't quite work, and you have to shop around and find someone else. So we know that process can be a big thing, and support coordinators are fantastic in that space. So what the NDIS wanted to do is to make it easier for more people to access support coordination, as well as to make more hours of support coordination available for those who are already using a support coordinator. So the easiest way to do that was to, and this is what they have done, is they've added in 3 line items for support coordination into core. So what that means is if you have a core budget, whether you have support coordination already or not, you can now engage a support coordinator. And they can help you with crisis planning, around COVID. They can help you with thinking about maybe finding some new supports if the people or organisations that currently support you are not able to support you, those types of things. So what's happened there? So it's still, again, the pricing on that is based on how is your plan managed. Agency and plan management stick to the price guide rates, and they're the same. They didn't change in the recent 10% update. Or if you're self-managing, then that's up to you to negotiate with your support coordinator. Do you need a new service agreement for a support court for more hours? Again, if you're self or plan managing, service agreements are a good idea, but not essential. So that's up to you. But as always, unless you already have prior agreement that somebody's just is going to charge you more hours or for more work, then you can go and have that conversation and engage with them in a way that you want to. So it's a great opportunity to get some extra help to maybe find some out of the box solutions, and even just to help get some of those solutions set up. I know in our personal situation, our son usually has quite a number of hours of support each day, and it's not necessarily physical, so we've been able to move a lot of that to virtual, and that's working really well. But that took a bit of effort to get going. What else on that? Oh, actually, there's a couple of things on that support coordination.
Yeah, go for it. We've got questions coming in. I'll park a few of those for a moment. Thank you, everyone who's asking them, and we'll jump into them in a second. But please feel free to continue.
Okay, so support coordination. So this change with support coordination under core is going to be reviewed in 6 months. So it's not a guarantee that those 3 item codes will be there forever. But we do know that one of the key strategies for the agency is to make funding, make our budget system more flexible. And there was hope that after the minister's announcement, or I think it might even have been back in December last year or maybe January, that we would get to that point of much more flexibility across capacity building supports and core. It was aimed for 1 July. Word in the background is that they're not quite ready technically ready to put that into place. And so I think these sort of short-term solutions of adding item codes into different budgets is probably the quickest and easiest way around for now. What that means for you as a support coordinator or as a person engaging with support coordination is that there's no time limit. So whereas before your support coordination budget would have had a certain capped amount, really there's now no hourly limits, if you like. There's obviously price caps for plan and agency, but there's no limit to the number of hours that you could use of support coordination from someone's core, or someone could engage with you. Obviously, the more you use, the less there is for other options or other supports to be put in place. So yes, it's great because it means people who haven't used, I can see Laura, you're asking a good question there. Can someone who doesn't have support coordination be billed for it out of their core? Absolutely. So it's open for people as long as you have core, and either you are plan or self-managed, then you can use unregistered or registered providers of support coordination, or of course if it's an agency managed budget, then you'd need to use an agency registered provider, but it can be billed out of core even if you've never had support coordination before.
Fantastic. Elisa, can I just jump in there? I know we've got up here that there's no maximum hour limits under core, so there's no cap on it. Is there a minimum at all? We've had this question a lot recently of, can I just get 2 to 4 hours of support coordination under my core funding if I have that funding available?
So look, that is up to and it's a really good question because we do know that even with the support coordination coming out of core, there is still that reporting requirement for support coordinators to report back to the agency as part of their service. So that would be something you'd need to discuss with your support coordinator. And really it would be around what is the task you're actually trying to achieve. It might be some simple, I just need to get some new names of workers who are currently able to service. Or it might be we actually need to do a proper crisis COVID approach. So it really is on an individual basis. There's no one answer
Fantastic. So I think it's really, from what you're saying there, it's about assessing the scope and potentially having that conversation with the support coordinator you may like to use to see what are you trying to achieve and how long does that support coordinator or the business that they work for think that that will take in terms of hours that they'd like to charge to help you achieve that effectively. They're going to have a good estimation, I would guess. A lot of support coordinators have great experience.
Exactly.
And they're going to be really experienced in estimating how long it will take them to deliver a quality service to you. So definitely, Elisa, I think huge value there is have that conversation with the support coordinators. And we've got some more questions coming in. And
if I can just finish, jump in on that point, Mel, it's really important that as a participant, sometimes not every hour of support coordination happens face-to-face. So you might have a conversation with a support coordinator and that may take an hour, 45 minutes, that type of time. There's a lot of work that they do in the background. So when you look at it, don't think, well, I only spoke to them for an hour. They may go and have to do 3 hours worth of legwork. So be aware that that's, and just negotiate it and discuss it up front so you're both clear about how many hours are being allocated and what sort of outcomes you're expecting.
Fantastic. And if there is anyone else asking these questions, I can see Justine's in the Q&A replying to a few. Laura, thank you for asking as well. The codes, we're happy to share the codes under core for support coordination, the charging lines, if anyone is looking for them as a support coordinator. Justine's in the chat box answering those now for you and also in the Q&A. So just jump on in there if you're looking for those answers. We might jump along to, there we go. Flexibility. This is really a big conversation. I know you touched on it before, Elisa, around we initially were expecting what they called fungibility, if you like, coming around July 1st. We are hearing through the back channels that they may not be quite ready, but they are seeming to instigate some of this flexibility into funding now. But the big question we're getting is, I suppose for a lot of people, if they can't access supports or their support provider can't provide them with, say, a support worker, how can they get some more flexibility in their funding? This is going to be really relevant for anyone who's agency managed as well.
Yeah, look, again, it's that whole, how the scheme operates hasn't really changed, but the circumstances in which we're currently living have. So if your plan is currently agency managed, that means that you're only able to use registered providers, which in this season might be a little bit harder to find or might not be able to provide the flexibility that you need. One of the things that moving to either plan management or self-management means that you can use unregistered providers. So you've got a much greater choice as to who you use. So let me use the classic gardening example. If you need some assistance with yard work and your core is agency managed, that means you have to find an NDIS registered gardener, which is not always that straightforward. So the NDIA are making it much easier at the moment to simply change how plans are managed. So you're not necessarily having to get a whole new plan. They're just changing the way that particular bucket or budget within your plan is managed. Best way to do that, there's a couple of ways to get the NDIA's help on that. Talk to your LAC. If you know who your LAC is and you have contact with them, or your early years provider, talk to them. They can usually help initiate that from the back end. The other option is to call the NDIA directly. I know that's not an option we often suggest, but in this case it has been quite helpful. Calling the NDIA directly on their 1-800 number and pressing 5, which is their COVID helpline, means that you get through to somebody who's very well aware of how to make those budget changes, how to make those fund management changes. So yeah, best idea is if you're needing more flexibility, look to move to either plan or self-management.
Fantastic. And I've just popped that 1-800 up with the extension 5 in the chat box. If anyone is looking for that number, that is the NDIS. So you can call them directly. Extension 5 will get you to that COVID-19 helpline to discuss urgent changes and those sorts of things. Now, Elisa, some of the other questions we've had around this needing more flexibility, and this is a controversial one, so bear with me. Can I pay someone in my family to support me?
Okay, it's a really good question, because with social distancing and the current laws, it can be difficult to have a worker come into your home. At the moment, the NDIA, as of last week, and we keep up to date on a daily basis with any new announcements, are still saying at this point in time, no, that hasn't changed. That rule around not paying direct family members still stands, even despite the current circumstances. I know there's, I'm a member of DIA, Disability Intermediaries Australia, which is a peak body we set up to help promote plan management and support coordination and help make this whole piece work better and lobby the agency for some good changes that really work for participants and work well. And one of those that we're currently having a conversation around is actually we really need to rethink this, because for this season, the circumstances of life have changed. So we haven't had a yes answer from the agency as yet. At the moment, it's still a very firm no. As always, though, there's always been the caveat that if your situation is different and there's specific reasons that you would require an individual family member to support you, then you just need to, again, contact the NDIA and get specific approval for it. So same as it's always been, no blanket change.
Fantastic. And I know this next question is just going to build upon this. Some people may be looking at family members, obviously. That question you've answered very thoroughly there, so thank you for that. The next one is around, I need X support. So I might need additional overnight support. I need more support workers to help me during this time, but I don't have enough funding in my plan. So what can I do?
Okay. Most important thing is to contact the NDIS early. They are much more open to early review. So if you do think that because of these changes you're going to run out of funding, give them a call, that 1-800 and option 5, or speak to your LAC. The other thing that's happening around that is that any plans that are coming to their end and you're happy with the amount of funding that's been in the plan, it's easy to just simply have that plan extended out for another year or 2 years, which means you don't have to go through this whole big planning process right now, which, as we know, hasn't been greatly successful for most people when it's done over the phone, and that's currently the way it's being done. So your call as to whether that's useful. The things I'd encourage you to think about, make sure if you don't have core supports, that if you should be asking for core supports in any new plan that's coming up. It just gives you a lot more flexibility. Make sure you've got that consumables budget in place as well. The third element of flexibility around, and if I think I'm running out of funding, how do I manage? So the NDIS has said that they will be flexible around moving money between budgets that we wouldn't normally have been able to move money between. The logistics on the mechanics of that are a little bit clunky, but this is what you need to do. Let's say you have a whole bunch of money in, say, health and well-being, and you're just not getting out there to meet with your exercise physiologist or to attend the groups that you would normally attend, and you want to use that money for something else. So what you can do is, again, contact the NDIA. Depending on how your plan is managed, either the plan manager will need to release a little bit of money from that budget, the NDIA will move it, and then the plan manager will be able to go back in and reallocate that money to the new budget. So it's a little clunky, and given the communication that comes back, it might take a little bit of follow-up on your behalf to check whether the agency has done it yet or not, because their basic answer to us so far has been there are no timeframes on as to how long this takes. So, and it's very early days. It's only been around for a week or so, and we're still navigating our way through that. But yes, you can, in theory, move money from one budget to another. It just, if you self-manage, that should be pretty straightforward. Just claim it out of whatever budget you like and keep good notes. Write COVID-19 next to everything. But yes, for plan management or agency, it's just a couple of logistics around how that happens.
Perfect. And just to firm that up for everyone, that is going from capacity building budgets to core, not the other way around?
Oh no, you can do either. So it's, yeah. So basically, if you need to move money from one budget to another, this is the way that they're currently moving money.
Fantastic. All right. We're just going to touch on a few more things while we're here. I'm getting some questions, and Dean's got another great one for you. But before we jump into Dean's question, I want to just preface this. What is happening with the automatic plan rollovers at the moment?
So what we've seen with automatic plan rollovers is, in the past, if the agency was getting a little bit busy and a little bit swamped and they couldn't quite get to you and your plan was approaching the end, what would most commonly happen is they would extend a plan for 28 days, which would allow that little bit of extra time to finish off any plan reviews and building the new plan. Instead of rolling over for 28 days, the big difference we're seeing is it's just an automatic rollover for 12 months or for 2 years. And you can elect for that. You can say, you know what, just roll my plan over, which, if you've got enough funding in right now and you're approaching the end of your plan, is probably a good way to go. Where it's tricky is for people who are currently running out of funding and that plan end is just that little bit too far to stretch to. And they're the people that you should be contacting your LAC and asking for an early plan review.
Fantastic. Okay, now to build upon that, and here comes Dean's question for you. What's happening with the plan start and end date? So with the plan extension, does my current plan start date remain the same and I tack on an extra 12 months?
Yeah.
Or do I get new plan dates, a new start and end date?
No, it is the same. Just as if you were having a plan extension for the 28 days, where they simply just move out the end date. So the same happens. Pretty much what we're seeing is they just double the funding that was in the original plan. So if your budgets and your plan is plan managed, what that would look like is our service bookings would remain in place, and the NDIA would extend the date out. Instead of extending it out for 28 days, they'll extend it out for a year or 2 years. And then the allocation of additional funding will appear. So if you had $10,000 in core, you would now see $20,000 in core. But of course, you've already done a year, you've already spent 10 of it. So in essence, it's basically just like, if it's a year extension, it's like doubling the plan.
Fantastic. Dean, I think that reaffirms that you're on the right page there and we're all on the same page. So that's really great. What we might do is I'm just going to jump along to something I just want to reiterate for everyone. If you joined us last week for our webinar, you may have already seen some of this information, but finding reliable sources of information during this time is really important. So whether it's regards health and well-being and COVID-19 from the government resources, or specifically for NDIS resources, the best places that we have found, and these are national resources. So for the NDIS, obviously jump on their website. They have a coronavirus page, as you can see here. They're constantly updating their FAQ or fact pages, and they've got Auslan, they've got animations now. They're constantly building that resource. So that is a great place to go. If you're looking for COVID-19 resources in relation to the impact throughout Australia, and the impact for yourself and your health and well-being for either you individually or your family, and also for your support workers, then the health.gov.au or australia.gov.au websites are fantastic. Once again, there are state-specific, so if you're in New South Wales or WA, there are individual state-specific resources that you can simply Google. They'll come up very high on your search terms there, so you should find them nice and easy. And for anyone looking for an easy English coronavirus resource, there is a fantastic one available on the Growing Space website. There's a link on this slide here. I'm happy to put that in the chat box for anyone looking for that as well. So it's an easy English version of how to explain coronavirus to an individual. So what we might do, Elisa, I'm just going to jump along there. We're going to jump into how we can help. So I might just stop sharing these slides and we'll go through a few more questions. We've got some great ones coming in. And I know, hold on 1 second till I find us all. Okay. Can you still see my screen?
No. Yes, I can see you.
You can see me? Great.
I can see you. Perfect.
That's what we're after. Alrighty. So we might switch on up. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, so support workers. I know we've touched on this a little bit and we always have questions about support workers. Some of the best ones I've had recently that I see a lot online is, can I have someone collect my shopping and drop it off for me? So can I have my support worker do that?
So again, it's, nothing has really changed. If your support worker is there to support you. So their role is really to bridge that gap between disability, and ordinary life. So if it would be standard that somebody could go and collect their own shopping, and that's just not available to you, then yes, your support worker can pick up your shopping and drop your shopping off. Again, it's in this current season of everybody wanting to stay safe, you make sure you've had your conversations around what type of work your worker is happy to do and how they're happy to perform that as well. But yeah, really any domestic assistance task, anything that you need because of disability, absolutely.
Fantastic. And to build on from that, we did have another question late last night, which was, can I buy face masks for my support worker? So a face mask would count as a PPE or personal protective equipment. What's the stance on, should I be buying that as the person with disability or as on behalf of the person that I support? Or should that be the responsibility of my support worker or their business?
So, Mel, that's a really great question, and it's one that's coming up a lot. The NDIA has actually popped an answer up on their Q&A site specifically around PPE, and their answer is that PPE is an everyday expense. I would argue that we don't normally have to buy face masks and this ridiculous amount of hand sanitizer. So I'm not sure that it's an everyday expense in my world, and possibly not in a lot of people's worlds. I think for me, this comes down to a couple of things if you're thinking about it logically. The first is, if you are employing your support worker, so you are directly employing them, they're not a contractor, they're not a sole trader, they're an employee for whom you pay as you go tax, you collect super, you pay their workers' compensation. If you're in that position of direct employment, which some people are, then in that case, as an employer, you have a responsibility to keep your worker safe. So in that case, yes, you probably should be providing that equipment and claiming for it. If your worker is a sole trader or works for a company and is a business and in any form contracting to you, then actually it's the responsibility of that business or that worker, that sole trader, to provide their own equipment. There's a couple of reasons that, and obviously your motivation is to keep yourself safe as well as your workers safe. I think it's really important that you're careful around who's responsible for that. And just from a legal point of view, again, this is not advice, this is personal opinion, but what would happen if you provided equipment and it was faulty? So, for me, I'd be like, actually, that's the responsibility of the worker. Following the current health guidance by the health department is really around that masks at this stage are not actually making a big difference, and that we should still continue with hand washing and other things. Look, that may change, but at this point, I think keep an eye on the NDIS Q&A just around that. I do know that the NDIS is trying to source more supplies for those who do need them, and that there's information coming out on every couple of days around where that's up to.
Yeah, and for any providers, just on the PPE equipment there, on the NDIS website, if you just search on their website, you will find they do have a stockpile for providers who can prove circumstantially that you haven't been able to access the PPE equipment for your staff, that you can then gain access to the stockpile from the government, provided you meet their criteria. So jump on the NDIA website to check that out. We've got a few more questions around this, and I am conscious of everyone's time, so we might keep it going for about another 10 minutes, Elisa, if that's okay with you. I feel like I'm grilling you, but this is what it's all about. It's getting our questions answered.
Good.
So the next one I've got for you is, I'm going to use a new support worker, and again, we're going to keep on this support worker topic just for now. What do they put on their invoice? So if I've got a new support worker, am I instructing them what to put on their invoice, or are there any resources that we can give to them?
Okay, so if you've got a new worker who is doing support work for the first time, perhaps, then I think it's really important that people understand, as support workers, that it's not just a case of going out and getting an ABN and off you go. You are actually starting to operate as a sole trader if you operate in that way. And there are some legal requirements and some tax requirements that you need to be aware of. So it's very important that if you are going to operate as a sole trader and as an independent support worker, that you get some great advice from your own personal accountant. That will help you make some good decisions around what you do and how you set up. But I would say the most important thing when it comes to invoicing, for example, is to make sure that you include some, your invoice is compliant with Australian business tax invoice requirements. On our website, probably the quickest and easiest way is have a look at right at the top of plantracker.com.au is a link that says invoicing info for providers. And we've got some good sample information there as to what you need to include, as well as an example invoice that you can have a look at.
Fantastic. And I've popped that link up in the chat box for anyone. It's plantracker.com.au/providers if you want to go directly there. That'll have all the information there. And we've got some help and support articles that really does just go through the basics that may help, particularly for individual support workers or businesses just getting started, as to what's required on an invoice, particularly from a plan manager like Plan Tracker. We love to know that when we receive an invoice, we can get it processed as quickly as possible for you.
That's it.
So having that correct information up front gets it first go through nice and easy. So it's definitely worthwhile investing a little bit of time in making sure that you have the right information that a plan manager or a participant might need to claim your invoice through the portal or through their plan manager. So one of the other questions we're getting at the moment is, if my transport funding, so we're going to jump to a new topic here, if my transport funding is plan managed, how can I use it? So how does that work versus, for instance, I know a lot of participants have automatic participant transport installations where they might receive it fortnightly from the NDIS directly into their account. So what's different if my budget for transport is plan managed?
Oh, Mel, transport. Seriously, the NDIA has walked the entire country through the biggest debacle around transport for the last, 10 months? So the current situation as we understand it around transport, the transport budget is part of your NDIS plan. It can be managed in a few different ways. If your transport budget is managed, what the NDIA call but never write anywhere as special self-managed, which means, as Mel described, you receive it as an allowance into your bank account on a fortnightly basis, then you can use it for whatever forms of transport you like, in whichever way you like. There's no need to account for it. You don't have to keep receipts. It's yours to use for transport. So that might mean grabbing an Uber or other rideshare service, might mean grabbing a taxi, bus fares, contributing towards mileage or petrol for somebody else that's going to help drive you around, or engaging with a transport provider specifically for your needs and paying them from that budget. The NDIS on March 1 finally made a change to the transport rolled out new policy that came out on July 1 last year. So basically on July 1 last year, they said, if your transport budget is not plan managed, then you cannot, and we're talking about plan managed customers here, if your transport budget is not plan managed, then you can't claim any of those kilometres where you travel with your support worker, etc., which caused a massive hoo-ha, because really, the transport allowance paid for people directly is really not sufficient to actually allow you to engage in community. And that has caused enormous heartache for a number of people. So after much lobbying and much pressure, the NDIA has moved slightly forward. We'd like to see them move a bit further, but they've moved to the point where on March 1, they said, okay, you can use your core supports flexibly to pay for participant transport. So where a participant travels with a support worker, you can claim the kilometres for that, provided that you are undertaking an NDIS funded activity. So in other words, if you're just grabbing a cab to take you to Aunt Mary's for lunch, we can't claim that for you out of core. That comes out of your allowance. If you are taking an Uber with your support worker, or you are in your support worker's car, that cost can be claimed from your core supports. So if your actual funding, though, is managed differently. So if your transport budget isn't being paid into your bank account and it's plan managed, then in that situation, it's simply like any other budget. In order to claim from that budget, you need to provide invoices or receipts. So invoices for us to pay the provider directly, or a receipt for us to reimburse you. So it might be that you are using transport. Again, that caveat of you must be engaged in an NDIS funded activity exists. We'd like to see that changed. We're still lobbying, but right now that's how it is. So in that case, you simply, the support worker provides kilometres, 37 kilometres times 85 cents on their invoice as part of their invoice for support work services, and we're able to claim that directly from your plan and then send that on. We can do that anyway, even if we're not plan managing your budget. But yeah, the taxi fares, Ubers, those things, if you have receipts, send them in if we're plan managing your transport, and they can be claimed and dealt with. So it was a very long answer to what is.
I think it's hugely valuable for everyone just
very
to go back
important,
through that, because there's been a lot of changes, and whilst you may not be using transport as much right now, you obviously, COVID-19, it's a time that this too shall pass. So we will get through this together.
That's right.
And when we get to the other side, we'll probably talk about transport and all the changes they've made again. Hopefully they're in the right direction that we'd love to see. So I've got 2 more questions for you, and then I think we might wrap up for the afternoon. And if anyone is interested, we are looking at doing these as a regular session. So if you're keen for that to happen, reach out and let us know. We're looking at the moment maybe doing it each fortnight. We'd love to hear what you think about that. And if you've got any questions in the meantime, pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A section for us. All right, I think we'll go with the next one, which is around AT quotes. So this one came in, I think it was Denise. Let me just scroll back on up there. Yes, Denise, hi and welcome. So having 2 kids under the NDIS, so both with plans, but doesn't have any money to fund purchasing iPads or a tablet or device, as we touched on earlier, for telehealth and speech therapy and those sorts of services.
Just on that, we actually need to be very careful. That's actually for teletherapy.
That's where I was going to go with
the
telehealth.
Okay, all right.
So just a reminder for everyone, telehealth is an allied health service. So that's where, sorry, did I use the wrong term?
Yep.
Telehealth?
Okay, telehealth is where you have an online session with your doctor. NDIS would say that's a medical requirement and therefore not fundable out of your plan. Teletherapy, where you have a session with, say, your allied health provider, like your OT, your speechy, your psychologist, that's where you would be able to use your funding for a device. So just, it's all about the language.
Thank you. The language there. And see, I do this all day, and Elisa does this all day, and I can still confuse it. So if we're confused, I'm sure everyone else is finding this a bit frustrating to keep up with. So thank you, Elisa, for giving us that pure clarity. Really appreciate it. To continue with Denise's question, she submitted some AT quotes. So I say AT, so a request or quote request to the agency. How long will it take to hear back? This is as long as a piece of string is my vote.
Denise, when did you put your requests in?
We might just wait for Denise to reply in there. Is there any general period of time that we'd expect to hear back in?
It's a funny thing. It's a little bit of a black hole, that AT request situation. It has improved. We've definitely seen significant improvements in the last 6 months. There's a couple of challenges around it, though. Because of the way they've structured it, if you apply for something and it's not actually expensive enough, sometimes it falls in between the cracks. We've had situations where people have applied for things that are under $1,500, and then they just go, well, that's not really big AT, so we don't have to approve it. So it just sits there and no answers come back. Look, my suggestion would be, if you have applied a little while, once they approve it, what's going to happen is it will actually trigger a plan review, because they can't just make a change to a plan. They have to actually rebuild the plan to include that budget to allow for the payment of that item. So I would suggest that the best thing to do is contact your LAC or contact your early years provider if your children are under 7, and just see if you can get them to figure out where it's up to and nudge it along. Yes, we're really hoping, especially around this low cost, low risk technology, that we just get a sensible answer out of the agency in the next week or so, which just says actually claim it from the therapy budget, improve daily living. And if that happens, I would just not worry about waiting to hear back on the other, and I would just get on with life, you know.
Fantastic. All right, I think we'll go for one final question, Elisa. So this one came in, and it is, can I claim for online dance classes if my gym is closed and I'm really not getting out to exercise? So I would preface, and sorry, I'm just going to scroll up and find our author here. Mary, this one is for you, Mary. Thank you for asking this. I would first of all preface that it would need to be a goal in your NDIS plan that exercise. Elisa, would you agree with that?
Yeah, so look, again, coming back to how the course is being delivered, whether it's online or whether it's not online, it doesn't really matter. So is it a disability support? So in that particular instance, if you're a Plan Tracker customer, and I'm suspicious that you might be, hi Mary, what we need to do is have a quick look and go, okay, which budgets do you have? What are the plan goals? If there's goals around social connection and there's goals around fitness and it meets those goals, then yes. Look, at Plan Tracker, our default answer to most questions, our default answer is yes. And then we figure out, is there any reason we shouldn't be saying yes, rather than going the other way? You know, I think it's so important for plan managers to realize that actually the role of plan manager is not as a gatekeeper. It's about helping you to make the decisions and self-direct your funding. So helping you to understand, how do those 7 questions around, is it good value for money? Is it safe? Does it help me connect with my community? Does it meet my plan goals? Do I have money in my budget? Those things. You know, if you can answer yes to all of those, then probably for you that's something legitimate that you should be claiming. So every time we're going to help you work through those questions yourself and make your own call. Yeah, so Mary, I hope that kind of answered your questions or question. Feel free to give the team a call and just check with that. But I would think in that situation, it's most likely to be a yes.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more there, Elisa. And it comes back down to what we've talked about a lot here today, which is individuality of funding and choices really under the NDIS. So if you're with Plan Tracker, whether you're plan managing with us or you're using our self-management app, definitely you can always give us a ring. We're happy to chat through, have a look at your plan if we're plan managing for you, and just really work out. We try to default to yes wherever possible. And then we'll have a look and say, any reason we should be saying no to this? But we're not gatekeepers. We're very much on the front foot of that and saying we are not the gatekeepers of your funding. We are here to help and work with you. So we're on your team and we've always valued being that way. I'd just like to take a moment to thank everyone who's joined us live for all the amazing questions, whether you're popping them up privately in the chat box, putting them up publicly or in the Q&A, or you submitted to us beforehand online. We really appreciate your time here today. And Elisa, thank you so much. I've had so much value. I've learned so many things here today, as I'm sure all of our attendees have, and everyone who's watching the replay. Thank you. Huge gratitude from all of us for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a very busy week ahead and what will be a few months at the current circumstances that we're looking at. So did you have anything you wanted to leave everyone with?
Look, yeah, thank you, Mel. Look, I think it's so important that we, as a community, just continue to tackle this whole COVID-19 thing, how we use our disability support, how we move forward with just real common sense, you know, and practicalities around real people making life work in extraordinary situations. I'd love to do this again in a couple of weeks because it'll be really interesting as to what are we talking about in 2 weeks. What's going to change between now and then? You know, what are the new things we're tackling? So I think having a conversation is a really important thing. As always, you know, if you're engaged with us as a customer or you're a support coordinator and you've got questions or anyone at all, just anytime feel free to give our team a call. You're always welcome to just ask, and we'll do our best to share, I guess, our thoughts and our understanding on how things are being rolled out.
Fantastic. And for anyone looking to reach Plan Tracker, you can reach us via phone on 1800 549 670 or email hello@plantracker.com.au. Until next time, we thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye for now.
Terrific. Thanks, Mel. Bye, everybody.